Welcome in, everybody. This is In the Gun, episode 177. The dog days of summer are over. Football is back. We can actually really get into talking about this thing now as Neil Brown and the Mountaineers took the field for the first time in the 2024 campaign on Wednesday. He also spoke with the media. Jed will talk about that along with some of the news and notes that you want to have, some things to watch out for as camp starts to really get underway here. We'll get to Jed here in just a moment. But before we do, a word from our sponsors. First, from, as always, BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 in your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball or Formula One racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the games are over, head over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of the 150 slot games available. Head to the website to get in on the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% bonus credit for your first deposit up to $250. BetOnline, where the game starts. And also a shout out to our guys at Toothman Ford. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. So before we kick it over to Jed, we're going to take a quick break here. And then when we come back, he'll break everything down for you as we get things started here in the 2024 season of West Virginia football.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
ITG will return after these messages.
Connects with Cole Taylor. Taylor dives to the end zone. Touchdown, West Virginia. 43 yards.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
If you work the land, you just got to be a jack of all trades type. There's just too much to do. So if you got to be a welder or a farmer or a ditch digger, that's just who you are that day. Then tomorrow, you can be somebody else.
Get your Coyote at the new location of Johnston Equipment between Weston and Buchanan.
Let me start off by giving a shout out to Skylar for getting us rolling and taking care of some of the housekeeping. And as you heard him talk about, camp is officially underway for the 2024 Mountaineers in Morgantown, and that means that the 2023 campaign is officially in the rear view. West Virginia, of course, finished 9-4 with a Duke's Mayo Bowl win over North Carolina last year. And before we start looking ahead to 2024, I wanted to reflect on some things, dig up some numbers, and ask, what type of challenge might the Mountaineers have before them? So here's some perspective for us. Since 2018, 11 Big 12 teams have won 9 games in a season with the opportunity to improve on their winning percentage the following year. Of those 11 teams, 9 of the 11 have failed to improve on their winning percentage the following year. One team matched their winning percentage the next year, and only one of the 11, Oklahoma, from 2020 into 2021 is the only of the 11 teams to win 9 or more games in the Big 12 since 2018 to actually have a better winning percentage the following year. This is a fiercely competitive league, this Big 12, maybe particularly with all the parity in the new Big 12, even more so. A couple more things on this 9+ wins metric before we move on to some of the things that are going on in camp that I want to keep an eye on. Let's bring this closer to home and look at the last 10 times West Virginia has won 9 or more games in a season and how they did in their efforts to improve on that the following season. The last 10 times West Virginia has won 9 or more games, here's how it shakes out. In those 10 seasons, 5 times the Mountaineers failed to improve on their winning percentage the following year. 3 times West Virginia matched their record the following year. And one time in the 10, West Virginia did manage to improve on a 9-win season. That was when Bill Stewart's 2010 squad finished at 9-4. And of course, the following year in 2011, Dana Holgerson's Mountaineers became Orange Bowl and Big East champions and went 10-3, improving on Stu's 9-4 record the previous season. That's the one time of the 10 that West Virginia successfully improved on a 9-win season. Now, if you're scoring at home, which I certainly hope you're not, you might be thinking, that doesn't add up to 10. You said the last 10 times West Virginia tried to improve on a 9-win season. We said 5 times they fell short, 3 times they equaled their record the following year, and 1 time they improved on the record. That adds up to 9. Well, that's because the 10th time we don't know yet. That's what's about to happen with Neil Brown's 2024 Mountaineers as they try and improve on the 2023 West Virginia record of 9-4. Last year, the Mountaineers were one of 6 teams in the Big 12 that won 9 or more games. This year, their challenge is to try and improve on that. The more you win, the more the games matter each week, week in, week out. So it stands to reason that it is, in fact, such a tall order in trying to improve on a 9-win season. It's something that Hall of Fame legend Don Nehlen never did at West Virginia. Coach Nehlen never had a 9-win season and improved on that the next year. When you look at all his breakout seasons, they didn't follow 9 or more wins. And when you look at what Coach Rodriguez did at West Virginia, he never managed to improve on a 9-win season. He matched it a couple times, but didn't improve on it. So it's a challenge to do this. Camp's just getting underway. This is the time of year that across the country, hope should be springing eternal in all fan bases. And West Virginia fans should certainly be no different. So here's some good news. Consider this a silver lining in this challenge to improve on a 9-win season. It might not be an easy thing to do to improve on a season of 9 or more wins. But fortunately for West Virginia fans, one cat that has demonstrated that he does know how to do it is Neil Brown. He did so at Troy right in the middle of their 3-year run of double-digit wins. In 2016, with Neil as the head coach, Troy finished 10-3. Tough to improve on, right? Well, in 2017, the Trojans improved to 11-2 and won a share of the Sun Belt Conference Championship. So good news for Mountaineer fans, even though it's challenging to take a 9-win season or more and improve on that, as we've demonstrated throughout the course of this conversation in the Big 12 and West Virginia's history. Neil Brown is a guy who has navigated this course before. At least for Coach Brown, these are not uncharted waters as we try and get beyond those 9 wins up to 10 or 11 or more, dot all our I's, cross all our T's, and earn the right to be playing very meaningful football late into November with an opportunity to possibly play at Jerry World for the Big 12 championship game early in December. Now, let's get into a couple quick things we want to focus on as camp is now underway. Who will provide the depth for West Virginia's offensive line. A year ago, we recognized that the strength of this football team would necessarily have to be a battle-tested offensive line and the 5 starters that constituted that unit. What we didn't recognize going in was this would be an offensive line that even when one or more of those starters was down, we really wouldn't miss a beat offensively because of the depth provided by 1 or 2 swingmen. Pat Kerwin, the former general manager of the New York Jets, currently hosts a talk show on SiriusXM. Great football mind. He has said that a lot of times to have a great offensive line, you need a guy in that group that nobody saw coming, a guy that flipped a switch and just found a nasty streak. Well, for West Virginia last year, I would argue we didn't have just one of those guys, but we had 2. We had Jaquay Hubbard, who had played a lot of football for West Virginia after transferring in from Virginia and reshaping himself. But despite extensive playing time, he really hadn't found that nasty streak quite yet. It arrived in 2023. And then there was Nick Malone. Nick was kind of an untested commodity, or he represented some element of versatility, but he really wasn't that tested coming into the 2023 season. He only played a couple dozen snaps the year before, didn't quite know what to expect out of Nick Malone. Both Jaquay and Nick asserted themselves and stepped forward and became 2 of the 7 different guys West Virginia had to start on the offensive line. You've heard Matt Moore say, we have 5 starters back of the 7 who started games for us last year. There were times that Doug Nestor was out, Wyatt Milam was out, Tomas Rimac was out. And then, of course, there was the shuffling of the deck that this unit had to undergo when Zach Frazier was lost late in the Baylor game. That takes depth and it takes versatility as a unit to pull something like that off. That depth on the West Virginia offensive line played a massive role in what this team turned out to be last year, which begs the question, who might be best positioned this season to possibly play a similar role? Not just providing high-level depth, but maybe even battling their way into a possibility of cracking the starting 5. As far as candidates, to simplify the conversation, what I did was I'm acting off the preseason depth chart, the 2 deep on the offensive line, and we're going to talk about the 5 immediate backups at those 5 positions. There are obviously some guys that, could get hot at the right time that aren't included in that 2 deep, particularly when I think of the composition of this offensive line on the interior parts of it, whether it's center, the combination of the guards. So when I talk about these candidates who might battle their way into some quality time or maybe even ultimately into a starting spot, I want you to ask yourself, who among these guys that I'm talking about can do one of a couple things? The path of least resistance, of course, is to make the most of your opportunities. Neil Brown said on Wednesday in his press conference, in his introductory remarks, this is going to be a very physical camp.
We'll scrimmage twice. We're going to have a really physical camp. With the new rules, the coach to player and the iPads feel like we're going to make it more game-like 4 or 5 times before we suit up against Penn State.
Which guy or guys at the point of attack might step forward, seize on that opportunity, show their physicality, have such an incredible camp that they make themselves, in the eyes of the coaching staff, literally undeniable before the Penn State game even gets here. But what's more likely is one or more of these guys follow a similar path to what Nick Malone did last year. Nick Malone, through the course of the first 5 games, played 85 total snaps, basically in spot duty. He was getting some limited opportunities. He had some versatility. He would swing around, play different spots. He was getting some snaps, but he was obviously improving with those opportunities and making the most of those snaps that he was getting. Now, fast forward to the Houston game midseason. By the time the Houston game rolled around, you had both Tomas Rimac and Wyatt Milam on the shelf due to injury. So Matt Moore was forced to reshuffle the deck once again. He was forced to adjust. So that created an opportunity for Nick Malone. And Nick Malone at Houston that night played 85 snaps, made the absolute most of that opportunity, and created a situation for himself that he played a role down the stretch as a significant contributor and even a spot starter. Who among these guys that we are about to discuss that are currently reserves might do one of those two things? An incredible camp, or with each opportunity that comes their way the first half of the season, makes the most of those and keeps edging forward and getting a little better and improving until some way midway through the year, you find yourselves in a situation where they are part of what you are doing offensively. Doubling back once again, what I'm looking at here, it's not necessarily positions as much as it is body types. A body type for the interior offensive line, that center guard type build, and a body type for the edge, those guys who can populate the tackle spots. And let's start with this. Johnny Williams backing up Wyatt Milam at the left tackle spot. Johnny Williams is a guy that this staff has been high on for a long time. He's a big man, 6'7", weighing in now about 315. He put on 8 pounds in the offseason. A lot of that muscle. He's starting to tone up a little bit and get his body in better shape. Last year, he did play some football for us. 4 games, almost 50 snaps. That's just enough to maybe use that as a learning opportunity when you're studying tape in the offseason with Matt Moore and the offensive staff. He was more consistent and physical in the spring, which is what you want to see from him. Head coach Neil Brown has gone as far as to say Johnny will be a factor for us. Look, the indications are there. When you hear your head coach talking like that, that tells you that a guy is right on the cusp, right on the edge of taking that step to being ready to be a serious contributor. Offensive coordinator Chad Scott, when you look at what he had to say about Johnny Williams, he said Johnny is going to be special. He's athletic, he's tough, he's physical, and he has long arms. This is a smart kid. He's an intelligent kid. He's very engaged. He's a strong body mover. He has to refine some things. And I think once he does that, he will be in position to really push and add not just some depth, but maybe even ultimately some quality and some spot start opportunities for this offensive line. Over on the other side, at the right tackle spot, backing up Nick Malone, who is penciled in as the starter heading into camp, is backup Xavier Bosley, a transfer from Jacksonville State, a G5 program where he played, of course, for head coach Rich Rodriguez and offensive line coach Rick Trickett. And trust me, I speak from personal experience when I tell you, a kid who was coached by Rick Trickett is going to come out of that experience being well drilled, being a heck of a technician, and having a hard edge to him. And that's what you get with Xavier Bosley. Playing 1 season at Jacksonville State, he earned freshman All-American honors, put up solid numbers. Break down some numbers for you right here. 366 pass pro sets. He only allowed 1 quarterback sack in those 366 sets. 5 quarterback hits, 8 quarterback hurries. Xavier Bosley is a West Virginia guy, played for head coach Donnie Mays at South Charleston. West Virginia went after him pretty aggressively, trying to get him as a preferred walk-on to enter the program right out of high school. Instead, he chose to head south, play for Jack State, but now is transferring in. The question's going to be, can he step up in the competition? Yes, he was dominant at the G5 level. What happens when he moves into the Big 12 and is asked to face some of these NFL caliber edge rushers that these offensive tackles in the Big 12 are tasked with? Neil Brown calls him hungry, but once again spoke to the learning curve. This is going to be a higher level of competition with him. He needs to get a little bit stronger. Xavier Bosley is the type of kid who has played high-level football, played it very well. If the game slows down for him enough at this level, at the P4 level, things could happen and happen quickly when that light comes on. And don't be surprised if early in the season he's pushing to steal some reps on this West Virginia offensive line, if not even sooner. Let's now move down to the inside. We'll take a look at the interior offensive line positions, who the candidates might be to push for some playing time there. We'll start at center, then work our way out to the guard spots. Of course, Brandon Yates is the starter at center heading into camp. He's backed up by Landon Livingston. Landon got in 3 games last year. Remember, in the spring, Brandon Yates did miss some time due to injury. That gave Landon Livingston an opportunity to work with the ones. Those are great reps and great experience. So that's going to help him over the long haul as well. He's an athletic kid, but once again, probably needs a little more strength to him. So over the long haul, the Mike Joseph effect could really help Landon Livingston. He's a good technician, and Matt Moore likes to talk about the fact that he's a very coachable kid. And at that position, those are the types of things that matter. So keep an eye on him at that center spot as we move through camp and then into the season. Moving over to the left guard spot, Tomas Rimac, of course, is the starter heading into the season. Tomas is backed up by Solly Weedman. Solly Weedman played some special teams for us last year. He got in 5 games on the offensive line, saw some significant time against Duquesne, got some decent snaps later in the year against BYU. Another guy who had a great opportunity in the spring, Tomas Rimac, missed the spring due to injury, was recovering. So Solly got to step in and rep with the ones throughout the course of spring. So great experience for him. He can move. This is another guy that can move around in space. He's athletic. He, as Matt Moore says, needs reps to settle down. You very much get the sense that Solly Weedman is the type of kid that once he finds his comfort zone, he's going to become a very reliable and dependable football player for this West Virginia offensive line. The only question is, when's that going to happen? Sooner rather than later? Stay tuned. To be determined as we go through camp and work our way into the season. And then let's move over to the other guard spot. At right guard, Jaquay Hubbard penciled in as the starter as camp begins. Jaquay is backed up by Nick Cray. Nick Cray fascinates me. This is a kid who's 6'6". Now he's over 300 pounds, about 305. He's added 7 more pounds this offseason. He played high school football at 245 pounds. Since then, just imagine, Mike Joseph and this staff in the nutrition program at West Virginia, he's put on 60 pounds since he finished his high school football career. He was a multi-sport athlete in high school, a freakish athlete. In basketball, he averaged a double-double, just great feat. This is a kid who played right tackle during his redshirt freshman year, now occupying the guard spot. It demonstrates or speaks to his versatility and the different types of things that he can offer. And to that end, he's the type of athlete who might be able to be that serve as that extra tight end, much in the role that Nick Malone played in the past, that heavy tight end when we want to bulk things up, slap an 80-something jersey on him and put him in the game outside the tackle. He has a chance, the staff says, to push to be in the front group. He's just a very gifted and talented athletic kid for his size. But once again, when the light comes on for him, it's scary as to how fast things might come together and see him maybe even start to dominate. The question becomes, will that start to play out in camp, or will it be at some point during the season or moving forward? Moving on to the other thing that I want to keep a close eye on as camp gets underway, the linebacker room. Is it underrated? Is it overhyped? Is it just right? First, let's define the terms. When I say linebacker, I'm confining that meaning to the Mike and the Will on the West Virginia defense. In other words, the interior linebacker spots in the 3-4 configuration of the West Virginia defense. We'll discuss the more hybrid spots, the spur and the spear, at another date moving forward. But right now, I'm just talking about those interior box players, your Mike and your Will. I want to break down who we have as potential starters, who we have as potential backups, what that depth might look like going into this season. So let's lend this whole conversation some perspective. Heading into the 2024 season, when you look at the two deep between these two positions, there are 13 combined starts. 7 of those come from the Will position. All 7 of those starts were made by Ben Cutter as a true freshman last year, and the other 6 come from the Mike position, a combination of Trey Lathan and Caden Beiser last year. 13 combined starts doesn't sound like much. That's because it's not. But it is, in fact, a little more than West Virginia entered last season with. Entering the 2023 season, the Mike and Will groups combined for a total of 12 career starts, and all 12 of those were by Lee Koba. The Will backer group had no starts. Go back to 2022. The West Virginia linebacker room, when you combine the Mikes and the Wills, had just 4 career starts. You have to go all the way back to 2020 to find the last time that a West Virginia interior linebacker group had significant or considerable experience entering the season. That year, that group, that combination of Mike backers and Will backers, had 34 career starts. That's back when Dylan Tonkery was around, Josh Chandler Samedo, Exree Lowe. Those three combined for 34 starts. So it's been a while since West Virginia entered a season with the luxury of robust experience at linebacker. We've certainly entered seasons under Neil Brown with less experience at linebacker, but I'm not so sure that with Coach Brown, we've entered a season with more potential at linebacker.
You said the P word.
Potential isn't a strategy, but it's certainly an opportunity. And I guess it's fair to say that what someone might glean from this West Virginia linebacker room, untested as it might be, is in the eye of the beholder. So let's take a look at the five guys who are occupying that room and what kind of potential each of them might have. There is a cross-training dimension to these two spots in the base configuration of West Virginia's 3-4 defensive structure, the Mike and the Will spot. Sometimes their assignments are similar enough. Sometimes their fits are similar enough. They might mirror each other just enough that you can have one or multiple guys cross-trained to play both spots to give Jordan Leslie and the West Virginia defensive staff a little more flexibility in terms of how they approach that. But let's start with the Mike position on the depth chart and how it's laid out. The starter is Trey Lathan. Lathan, of course, was lost for the season in the 5th game of the year at TCU when he fractured his tibia and fibula. They were repaired with a rod and 4 screws, and it was great to hear him tell everybody in the spring that he was able to pick up right where he left off before the injury, because where he left off was an incredible place. He was playing what I might consider all conference level linebacker through 4.5 games. When you look at what he was able to accomplish and impact what we were doing defensively through just 4.5 games, this number kind of puts it in perspective. Trey Lathan had 8 quarterback hits. That was tied for number 3 in the entire Big 12. And that was, again, through 4.5 games. He had 3 of those against Penn State. So against elite competition, he was making an impact. His timing is impeccable in terms of finding his way through those gaps, finding his way downhill, timing up, syncing things up to the snap. He had 25 snaps over the slot last year. So this is where the conversation starts to get interesting. He wasn't just a creature of the box. What guys like Trey Lathan put you in position to do is be a little more versatile defensively. If you face a team that's going to give you a pro personnel set, go a little heavier with what we call 12 personnel, 1 back and 2 tight ends, or even pro personnel, a fullback or an H-back type, a heavy H-back body type, and a running back and a tight end. Well, West Virginia, Jordan Leslie can bulk up defensively. They can take that hybrid nickel type defender out of the spear spot, which is to the field, and sometimes asked to play in a little bit of space. And Trey Lathan is both physical enough and athletic enough to hold down that position against some of these more physical personnel sets from the offense. So it puts you in position to match those personnel sets better. But if Trey can pick back up what he was doing through the first 4 games last year, he could prove to be a major weapon for Jordan Leslie's West Virginia defense. Staying at Mike linebacker, let's talk about Caden Beiser. This kid has really come a long way. Played a lot of football for us last year, more than you might expect. Got 130 snaps defensively, but 181 on special teams. So he kind of worked his way into the mix the old school way by hopping his wares in the transition units until next thing you know, he's earned the respect of his teammates and the staff, and he's starting to get more and more reps at the linebacker spot. So that's where it finds him. He had a great bowl game against North Carolina. He parlayed that into an even better offseason. Neil Brown has said Caden Beiser is in the mix for most improved. He's taken some serious strides. He got faster in the offseason. He got quicker. He's better at diagnosing things in terms of what he sees an offense trying to do. He sees it faster. He hits his run fits quicker. He's really improved his pass defense skills. So this is a kid who has taken strides and will only continue to get better and is going to continue to give West Virginia quality snaps in that linebacker room. Rounding out the Mike linebackers, let's talk about Ohio State transfer Reed Carrico. Nice addition that he's been to this football team. Things obviously didn't work out for him with the Buckeyes, but that doesn't entirely take away from what he was just a short few years ago coming out of Ironton High School. He was an incredibly coveted football player for a reason. When he came out of Ironton, he was the number 4 rated player in Ohio. He was a consensus 4-star. He was the nation's 5th ranked linebacker prospect. In Columbus, he played some special teams, but he struggled to get on the field defensively. A year ago in 2023, it didn't help his cause that he was part of a linebacker group at Ohio State that was very senior heavy. That unit included guys like Steele Chambers, Tommy Eichenberg, Cody Simon. Now, Reed Carrico can run. He's a physical guy. Some of what I saw out of him in the spring, especially in goal line and short yardage situations, was very appealing. He's not afraid to stick his nose down in it. He'll fly downhill. He'll put his body in harm's way. He'll do all the things that you want from a Mike linebacker. Now, of course, in the spring, he was kind of drinking from a fire hose with a different scheme than what he was used to at Ohio State. But I do think this is a guy that, even though he didn't play at Ohio State, he had 3 years of practice, 3 years of film study, 3 years of sitting in meeting rooms and learning, surrounded by high level players at every turn. That makes you better. Like in 1990, the one season that I did spend at West Virginia, even in practice, going past skeleton 7-on-7 against defenders like Daryl Whitmore, Leroy Axum, Mike Collins, linebacker Steve Grant, that made me a better football player. I'm confident that made me a better quarterback facing those types of guys. So when I transferred and moved on to Glenville, those types of experiences helped shape who I was as a quarterback. The fact that I faced that kind of talent in a practice setting and was surrounded by those types of guys, I'm confident and convinced made me a better football player, even though I wasn't playing, even though I wasn't getting live game reps. The same can be said, I'm sure, of Reed Carrico. This is a guy who's going to bring value to the West Virginia linebacker room, and I'm confident that value will only continue to increase as things move forward. Now we jump to the will linebacker group, and this is where I really start to get excited. When I look at Josiah Trotter, the starting will backer, I really like what he's brought to this football program. But for his injury last spring, I'm convinced that Josiah Trotter would ultimately have ended up as a starting linebacker for West Virginia at some point last year, maybe even at the conclusion of camp last year. So it was a big miss for West Virginia, and it's just as big to get him back at full health this year. This is a guy who Coach Neil Brown has said plays the game the right way. Boy, does he ever. He has imposing size, 6'2", pushing 240 pounds. When you watch him practice, for that matter, when you watched him in high school on tape, he's an incredibly instinctive football player. And speaking of high school, his position coach at West Virginia, Jeff Kuntz, linebacker coach, has pointed out, look, this is a kid in Josiah that has played a lot of football for very good teams, which is what St. Joseph's Prep in Pennsylvania is, a very good team, one of the better programs in all of Pennsylvania, or one of the better programs in the country for that matter. He's played a lot of football for good teams going deep into the playoffs. He has a lot of experience finding the ball and playing the position. That's a great point by Coach Kuntz. He got so much experience and so much game value reps at the high school level by playing all those additional postseason games that St. Joseph's Prep takes part in, that experience, it's difficult to quantify what that means just from mastering the skill of tracking a football, finding the ball, diagnosing schemes. This is a kid, Josiah Trotter, who is always full speed. The staff will tell you he might make a mistake, but he'll never make the same mistake twice. Very coachable. He stays engaged. He even stayed engaged after the injury last spring. There were little assignments that Coach Kuntz would give him from a film study standpoint or otherwise, and Josiah would dive right into it. He is a football player through and through. And if you can't tell, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I'm sold. Call it premature, call it whatever you want. But when I consider his skill set, when I look at his frame, his size, when I look at his instincts, when I study his tape, when I watch his practice at West Virginia in the spring and compare that to what I saw on tape at St. Joseph's in high school, when I consider his pedigree, what he comes from, what that family's all about, what he's been surrounded by his entire life. Trust me when I say it wasn't very windy the day Josiah blew from the Trotter tree. He is a football player through and through. And if, in fact, I'm more bullish than not on this West Virginia linebacker room, the combination of these Mike and Will backers, a major part of the reason that is the case is Josiah Trotter. I think West Virginia fans have a lot to be excited about with Josiah Trotter, not only because of what he will become, but because of what he in part already is. So, continuing with this Will Backer room, let's wrap things up with Ben Cutter, a guy who is listed as the backup to Josiah Trotter at this spot. He started 7 games out of necessity as a true freshman for West Virginia last year out of East Lincoln High School in North Carolina, where he was a tackling machine. But we did see some growing pains from Ben Cutter last year. Played a lot of football for us, logged over 460 snaps, played a lot of special teams. But as I said, some growing pains were involved, particularly when I look at him as a run defender. Cincinnati, Houston, Oklahoma, kind of all had their moments against him, and he struggled. From a pass defense standpoint, that's something else that he struggled at. He's committed this past off season to improving that dimension of his game. A year ago, as a pass defender, he was targeted 21 times and gave up 19 catches. And when you look at things the way they unfolded throughout the course of the season, later in the year, it got to a point that teams, as they studied tape on him, were starting to create matchups to specifically target him. You saw BYU do some of that, Cincinnati, Baylor in the regular season finale in Waco. But the good news is he's had a great offseason. He's become more flexible. He's gotten stronger, and he's focused on those shortcomings that hurt him last year, that he suffered through as a true freshman last year in his tougher moments. He's focused on missing fewer tacklers. Some of that's technique, some of that's film study, some of it's a broader understanding of what his role is supposed to be. He's really improved. You saw some of that in the spring. He's taking better angles to the football. That type of thing definitely helps somebody who's struggled in tackling. From a pass coverage standpoint, he's improved his skill set, but just as importantly, he now has a better understanding of route combinations, of how offenses are trying to attack you and what they're trying to do conceptually to exploit your coverage. He's demonstrating better technique. He's confronting blockers. He's using his footwork to help shed those blockers. These are all things that a year ago he wasn't an advanced enough football player to understand, much less execute. But now, when you hear him speak, it's obvious that he's starting to see the bigger picture of what West Virginia is trying to do defensively, not just his role in it, but what the overall goal is of the defense. And that's a major step forward for a young football player. Once that light comes on, a lot of good things typically follow. I really like the fact that he calls himself a low 3-star. He considers himself the lowest valued recruit in his class. And that really puts a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and it fits who he is. This is the type of kid, Ben Cutter, that if you can simply remove the obstacles, remove the mental fog, if you can just get him to that point and unleash what you saw when he was in high school, when he had almost 500 tackles in his final 3 years as a high school football player, if you can just get that part of the instinctive football player within him, he can really help this linebacker room. And after a very productive offseason, we're hoping he shored up some of the issues that really hurt him last year, and he comes out as a much improved football player, kind of what he was starting to look like in the spring. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't close out the linebacker room conversation without mentioning the 2 incoming true freshmen that will be added to the room in Curtis Jones and Ricky Williams. Both physical kids, both athletic kids, both have a nose for the football, both had highly productive high school careers. Things will be moving around them at 1,000 miles an hour. How quickly will things slow down so they can be in position to contribute and help this linebacker group? What kind of timeline might we be looking at? Stay tuned. Keep an eye on that as well. So there you have it with the West Virginia linebacker room. You decide, is this unit appropriately hyped, not hyped enough, overhyped? I'm going to let you decide. There's a lot of potential. There's that P word again in this room. Not a lot of experience to draw from, but in recent years, that's kind of been the case with these linebacker groups for West Virginia's defense under Neil Brown. Sometimes when you put that much weight into potential, of course you can get burned. It doesn't always work out, but that's part of what makes it exciting too. The potential is there, and who knows what the ceiling on that might in fact be if everything falls into place. Best case scenario. And then on the offensive line, we also talked about some guys to keep an eye on. We didn't name them all, but we went by the two deep. I'll give you 5 guys that are reserves currently to keep an eye on, and maybe some reasons that they might push, not just for a few extra reps or a little extra playing time, but in some cases, maybe even push to start. We'll see. So with all that being said, I'm sure there will be a lot more to keep an eye on as camp rolls on. But I'm going to toss it back to Skyler and let him close this thing out.
Great stuff as always, Jed. Thank you. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, go back and watch the Garrett Green film breakdown. As a passer, as a runner, Jed did really good stuff there with the film review, stuff that you won't find anywhere but here on In the Gun. Also, a lot of other cool content that we did this offseason, including stuff like West Virginia's best football teams, their worst football teams, because you have to talk about both of them. So we did that. A lot of other stuff that's out there. We've had the Charles Wesley Godwin interview. We have Philip Bowen. We have a lot of cool interviews and stuff like that. So make sure you go back and watch that stuff now, because now the fall camp is here. It's about to get really, really busy. We're going to be pushing out a lot of great content for the actual season. So go back and watch some of that evergreen content while you can. And before we get out of here, a thank you to a couple of our other friends. One from Fortis for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. Make sure to visit fortis.us.com. And then also the newest friends of the program, Johnston's Equipment. Check out their newest location on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. So that's going to do it for us here today. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube at In the Gun Podcast. You can follow us on X at the exact same handle. For Jed Drenning, the signal caller, for Wesley Euler and Owen Schmidt, I'm Skylar Callahan. Thank you for watching and listening to another episode of In the Gun. We'll be back here next week with a new show. Take care.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
I love the stadium. I got a chance to play here. And this is awesome. This is the way I pictured it.
This mission is over. It's over.